In 1999, Gladys Ricart was a 39-year-old single mother of two living in New Jersey, building a modest but beautiful life for herself. She immigrated to the United States as a child from the Dominican Republic, attended school in the States, and worked in an accounting job that she loved for a local travel agency. Despite her happiness, she obviously did struggle. She was a single full-time working parent. It's not easy.
No, I can't. It's so hard.
No. And she was grateful for the seemingly abundant, loving support she found in her boyfriend, fellow Dominican immigrant Augustine Garcia, when they met in early 1991. Augustine had done very well in the United States and had made it as a successful businessman in New York. And there were like all these articles about him as being like basically the American dream.
Okay.
Like this wealthy businessman who immigrated to the United States.
My alarm bells are going off.
He may have achieved much, but he was by no means a good man.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So they quickly fell in love after meeting, but their relationship was not a fairy tale. Gladys, a truly dazzling beauty, like Selena gorgeous.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Stunning.
Was wooed by very successful Augustine. This is a quote from the New York Times. Quote, Augustine Garcia was the American dream incarnate with his sharply tailored suits and his black Jeep Cherokee.
It was the 90s.
His 99 or whatever. Mr. Garcia
Everyone
was
had a
proof
black
of...
Jeep Cherokee.
It's so true. Mr. Garcia was proof to other Dominicans in Washington Heights that hard work and education had their rewards. A single father himself, successful businessman, and president of a local chamber of commerce, he also ran a daycare center and a vocational school whose graduates were lauded each year in a ceremony at the Hilton in Midtown. Mr. Garcia was a darling of the Spanish language press, frequently photographed with mayors and congressmen, and in 1996, as Grand Marshal of the Dominican Day Parade, he gloried in the cheers of thousands.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, he was a big deal. Both allies and rivals said it was hard not to be impressed. Quote, when I first met Augustine, I thought, finally, we have a first-class guy who can lead the Dominican community, said Eligio Pena, president of the National Supermarket Association. So like one of the business people in the area.
Chamber of Commerce Association. Yep. Right.
He was smart, articulate, and full of great ideas. He swept Gladys off her feet with grand gestures and a lavish lifestyle. He took her to high-profile events like political fundraisers at the Waldorf Astoria, receptions at Gracie Mansion, and a cruise to the Bahamas.
I've peed at the Waldorf Astoria.
Same.
Wow.
When he was Grand Marshal of the Dominican Parade, she was at his side. Quote, I always assumed they were married because he called her his wife, said Placido Rodriguez, president of the Dominico-American Travel Agencies and longtime friend of Augustine. They always seemed happy together. Though he was a beloved community member, he was a jealous partner, despite Gladys being faithful to him. And he constantly, cheated on her.
So he was possessive and controlling and suspicious and accusatory, and really he is the one doing all the shit.
Classic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the love bombing at first.
Yep. Throughout their 7-year relationship, he often accused her of cheating and was verbally and physically abusive toward her, even holding a gun to her and threatening her life on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
In order to protect herself and her children, Gladys ended the relationship and moved on with her life.
Which was very difficult, I'm sure, to do because he had all the power.
Yes. And we'll kind of get to it, while there were incidents that ended in police interaction, so there were incidents on the record, she had not filed a restraining order, and that's not like a victim blaming thing. It's just a fact in this case.
And they don't.
So there was
it's good to have documentation, but it's not a magical shield either. So
no.
Super not.
Yeah.
No. And like I said, there was documentation of patterns of his behavior.
But not everything
because the police had been called to their home.
Because it almost never is.
Exactly. So she breaks up with him. She really soon after, actually, meets a lovely man, 36-year-old James Preston Jr. They have a little meet cute. They're both getting lunch at the same place near her office in the Flatiron District. He was also an accountant. He worked right across the street, but the two had somehow never met until this day at lunch.
That's cute. That's really cute.
It's so cute. So they meet at this lunch spot and then decide to have lunch again together a couple days later. And she's elated. And her friends are saying, like, I remember her saying, I'm going to marry this guy. He's so awesome. Like, she was smitten.
Oh, my God. Can we just end the story here?
Can
this be the end of the story?
I know.
It's not.
It's super not. So they started dating, and within a couple months, they get engaged. And about 9 months later, they were, like, preparing to throw a lovely family ceremony that would take place mostly at their home, but then they'd actually get married at a small church nearby.
And she didn't need to, like, get a divorce because she was never married to Augustine.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
So this wedding picture is of her of that James.
Correct. Of her wedding to James.
She's so pretty.
I know, she's gorgeous. Augustine, however, had continued to stalk and harass Gladys this entire time. So again, from the New York Times, quote, Mr. Garcia kept calling Miss Ricart at work and at home, begging for another chance. Mm-hmm. With time, he became more insistent. Anne Marie Lorino, 19 years old, Miss Ricart's niece, said Mr. Garcia tried to break into Ms. Ricart's house in late last August, so in like 1999. A few weeks later, he came again while Mr. Preston was there, her new fiance, and banged on the doors and windows. And when Miss Ricart refused to let him in, he just like kept banging and banging and banging, and they called the police.
Yeah,
Jesus.
good, because that's psycho behavior and it's escalating and it's really fucking scary.
Really scary. Ms. Ricart declined to press charges. James Santulli, Bergen County's assistant chief prosecutor, said the police had confirmed the prior outbursts by Mr. Garcia, but said he could not discuss them for legal reasons. So, like, this was an ongoing case at this time. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have other reports. I can't tell you the details of that.
Right. But this is a pattern.
Yep. As his frustration, Mr. Garcia's frustration, grew, Mr. Garcia became increasingly creative and vengeful. Ms. Ricart's colleague said Mr. Bertel said the company tried to intervene on Ms. Ricart's behalf. So, like, her boss is even like, we're going to try to step in here because he's showing up at work. Like, he's harassing you at your job.
Which is great that her bosses realized that was not her fault and tried to protect her, because a lot of abusers will purposely interrupt and mess up their victims' work situation in order to make them more beholden to them.
Yup.
Or just out of revenge.
And Garcia, had gone to Gladys's son's college, like sent letters to his college saying that Gladys had put false information about her employment on his financial aid forms.
Oh, come
Oh my
on.
God. So really trying to fuck up her whole life.
Yes. And so the boss was like, we have your back. We know this is bullshit. Like, they had to intervene anyway because her son was looking at possibly getting pulled from his financial aid.
And kicked out of school.
Wow. Yep. On one occasion, he said Mr. Garcia left roses on her lawn, and a few days later, she awoke to find a Bible at her doorstep.
No.
Yep.
Don't like that.
And poor Gladys, her boss, reported saying that she specifically told him, if one day I don't show up here, he's the one who did it, which is just
and it's so
heartbreaking.
Like, we hear that
happens all the time.
Many of these stories, like these
time.
people, these mostly
They
women
know.
what's coming, and this and our society does not
Protect
fucking
them.
do enough to protect them.
Ugh.
No. And Gladys had a huge heart. She genuinely cared about Augustine's well-being. I mean, they were together for 7 years. They were both single parents. They raised their children
She just
together.
doesn't want him to be a psycho stalker, abuser.
She just wants him to leave her the fuck alone and move on with his
She's
life.
not messing up his life.
No. And with her wedding approaching, she had agreed to meet with him to provide some closure a few days before the wedding. The two were seen at a nearby cafe on CCTV camera, and in the footage, Gladys appeared visibly afraid to be in his presence, even in a public space.
If someone makes you feel like that, you don't owe them shit.
Yeah,
you don't owe them closure. You don't
owe them shit. And I also get
not blaming her. I'm trying to say for people listening.
I imagine, and obviously I'm speculating wildly, but I imagine she felt that if she kind of met him halfway, he would calm down.
A lot of victims
and that maybe by ignoring him, it would make it worse.
A lot of victims of abuse have been in a relationship with their abuser, and there's been these patterns of abuse, and they have learned to,
how
for
to
better
handle
or
it,
for worse, manage them and handle them as best they can. And so that then continues after they leave the relationship.
Yeah, I really think she was just doing her best to protect herself.
Right.
And
she was making really tough choices trying to make all of this stop.
Yeah, and she thought that, I'm going to hear him out would maybe...
She's trying to be safe. It's a public space.
Yeah.
But still, I'm just saying, like, for anyone listening, like, we get emails all the time from people who have... left abusive relationships or are realizing that they're in abusive relationships. And if somebody makes you feel afraid, even once and even for a moment, you've got to listen to that, and you don't have to. You don't know those shit.
So she meets up with him at the cafe. She lets him know she's not gonna get back together with him. She's moved on. She's getting ready to get married. I want you to move on. I wish you the best. And she leaves the cafe. Loved ones later recall how he had threatened her, saying, quote, he couldn't accept rejection. He threatened her with a gun. I don't think he necessarily had the gun on him, but was like,
I have a gun.
I have a gun. And said, if you're not with me, you won't be with anybody else. So on September 26th, 1999, Gladys was at the home she shared with her fiance, James, getting all dolled up for her wedding with her family and her 9 bridesmaids. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Augustine Garcia entered her home in Ridgefield, New Jersey, as she was posing for the last of her wedding photos before heading to the church in Flushing, Queens to get married.
You are fucking kidding. No.
Nope. You said red wedding.
I know. I always forget the theme when we're halfway through your case, and then it always hits me.
Amanda does a jump scare in her cases.
Yeah. He claimed to be there to offer his well wishes to the bride, and despite her family's unease about his presence, they let him in full view of a snapping photographer and a friend recording on a handheld video camera.
No.
There's full footage of this entire event.
Ooh.
I didn't watch any of it, obviously, but like, if you're depraved and on the internet, you can access it. Augustine entered the living room where Gladys was being photographed, took a Smith & Wesson revolver out of the briefcase he was carrying, and shot Gladys 3 times, killing her. She literally died in the arms of her own mother while still wearing her wedding gown, surrounded by her family and friends, and the entire attack was caught on videotape.
God.
Yeah.
What an absolute fucking psychopath.
Piece of shit. Ugh. Augustine was bravely tackled by Gladys's brother Juan while he was like trying to reload his gun. Apparently he had like 6 more bullets in his pocket. Yep. So he would have kept shooting, but Juan tackled him, wrestled the gun out of his hand, and held him in place until the police arrived within the next like 10 minutes.
Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, unbelievable act of bravery.
God.
And definitely Juan saved people's lives that day. So he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and he wouldn't see a courtroom until 2002, but when he did, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for the murder.
It was on tape and photographed.
Yeah. About a week after her murder, Gladys was returned to the Dominican Republic, where she was buried in her hometown of Tamboril, dressed in her blood-stained wedding gown.
Oh, my God.
Which, like, the drama. I'm here for it.
That is...
I mean, I want to be buried in my... just stained wedding gown.
Your cake-stained wedding gown.
That is...
so stained.
That's also just like a big fuck you to this guy. Like, you know what?
I was never yours, and even in eternal life in the beyond, I'll never be fucking
and I
yours.
was marrying James.
So fuck you.
I went to a funeral of someone a little bit older than us, but like essentially our age, and she got buried in a wedding dress. But she wasn't married or engaged. She just like had a wedding dress. That's
You're
what they buried her
joking.
in. It was.
I need to know who it was.
I'll tell you more off the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna need those details because I'm living for that. This is, mark my words, this is what I want.
Okay.
I don't.
You did have a very nice dress. I'll make sure you get buried in your wedding dress.
I believe you will. I'm gonna need a really big casket because it's a lot of skirt,
A lot of tool.
I want to get married in Amanda's wedding train. Just the train over my nude body.
Perfect.
The person who did it makes dusters.
Yeah,
I just want a
you can get
house
duster.
robe.
Terrence Williams Designs, y'all.
All right. While you finish your case, I'm going to cheer myself up by looking at
Do some shopping.
their amazing designs.
Send me the link.
Yeah. So the media coverage of this event, despite the story's very dramatic nature, like literally a stunningly beautiful bride killed on her wedding day by a jealous lover, all caught on camera.
God.
Like you'd think it would be an absolute frenzy. But even today, as I tried to research this case, there were very few articles of substance. There's one article in the New York Times. And the ones I did find, even the New York Times article, which, okay, yeah, the New York Times is a reputable resource, but this was written in the 90s. And it was like dripping with Augustine's achievement.
It's misogyny and racism.
Yes. And had so little, there was so little out there about Gladys and who she was as a person and like everything she had going for her. And yet the list of what Augustine had done.
And like she was an accountant and she raised her kids and her kid was going to college and she, was from an immigrant family and
a beautiful life and
relatives and
contributed to society
people
in
who
beautiful
loved her.
ways. But he fucking was grand marshal of a parade, so we're gonna have the first
and that's somehow more important
3/4
than
of
being
this
a
article
parent.
be about that. Yeah, I mean, it was so sad to research this. Really, truly fucking sad. Some people, however, did seem to see through Augustine's grandiose exterior. Quote, when he shook your hand, he tried to squeeze it to the bone, letting you know that he was powerful, that he was important, strong, and dominant,
Fuck
Hate
you.
that.
said Moises Perez, executive director of Alianza Dominicana, a social service organization. In retrospect, it was a reflection of low self-esteem, which is very true. Spot on analysis. Another individual came forward, a prominent Dominican businessman named Fernando Mateo, and said that when he was unable to attend an award ceremony sponsored by Augustine Garcia's Dominican Chamber of Commerce, Augustine angrily withdrew the honor from Fernando Mateo, saying he no longer deserved it.
Yeah, so he was a reactionary piece of shit.
Yeah.
What
He said, quote, I found him very impulsive and very strange. I thought of him as someone who wanted to have power, and if he didn't have it, it would aggravate and frustrate him tremendously. And that's it in a nutshell. That's like what all of
That's
this
an
is.
abuser. They just want to
Yeah,
control.
power and control.
And they
Sounds like
keep
Donald
it
Trump.
together in their
Yep.
in their professional lives, but then every once in a while there'll be a glimpse.
Yeah. Well, and this is just like the abuser's playbook. On the surface and on paper, oh, he's such a great guy. Look at all he's done. There's no way he could be doing this behind the scenes. We don't believe you. And then he fucking killed her. In response to the accolades Augustine was still given in the press, even after brutally murdering Gladys, women, specifically Dominican immigrants and intimate partner violence advocates and victims, felt that Gladys was not given a voice and wanted to tell her story and shed light on the danger of intimate partner violence that is so often ignored and swept under the rug. So, on September 26, 2001, on the second anniversary of Gladys's murder, this is fucking badass. A brave young woman took it upon herself to make a statement, and she started the Bride March. The idea for the march was originated by Josie Ashton, a young Dominican woman from Florida who is moved by the murder and outraged at the media and community's insensitive response or lack thereof to Gladys's murder. Josie resigned from her job and sacrificed months of her life being away from her family to walk in a wedding gown through several states from New York, from where this happened, down the East Coast to end up back in her home state of Florida. All in an attempt to draw attention to the horrors of intimate partner violence and like honor her memory.
Badass.
I love that.
Several organizations in New York City, including the Dominican Women's Development Center, the Violence Intervention Program, the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, the Dominican Women's Caucus, and the National Latino Alliance for the Elimination of Domestic Violence, helped Josie organize the first march, which served as a send-off for her 1,600-mile journey. She walked in a wedding gown to honor her memory and raise awareness for what was going on here.
So fucking cool.
They organized supporters in the New York metropolitan area, including family and friends of Gladys, to join Josie on the first leg of her walk from Gladys's home in New Jersey to the church in Queens where Gladys was to marry on that fateful September day.
Oh my God.
To date, thousands of people, including members of the Ricart family and other families affected by domestic violence, as well as elected officials, civic leaders, clergy, students, intimate partner violence advocates, and survivors, they gather on September 26th, rain or shine, to honor Gladys, often in wedding gowns.
Oh my God.
And also the many other victims who have also lost their lives to intimate partner violence, and just raise awareness. And marches have also taken place in like Miami, Florida, Lawrence, Massachusetts, Newburgh, New York, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In 2003, fucking Salma Hayek, in collaboration with Marie Claire magazine, held a march in Washington, D.C. for Gladys. In 2005, actor, author, and child survivor of domestic violence, Victor Rivers, participated in the New York City march. So like this has become, I don't know if it's still happening post-COVID and in 2023, but this was like a big deal.
I love that. That's
for many
great
years.
Organizing, because it really does draw the eye and attention. It gets the press out there because they know that they can get photographs.
But also, it struck me that I had never heard of this.
I know.
I'd never heard of this march.
Or this.
I'd never heard of this
case.
story. And it's just like, I think that speaks volumes to how much we silence, specifically women and especially women of color, in the media, and do not feature these stories, even after you get the fucking notice of Salma fucking Hayek getting in a wedding gown in Washington, D.C. And I still was like, holy shit, I had no idea this event existed, and I'd never heard this story before.
I've heard of the march, but I didn't know that this was the impetus of it. This is so alarming.
Isn't that unfucking
September
believable?
26th is basically a month from now. I mean, people can do it.
I have a gown.
Yeah.
Let's fucking go. So
Amanda will
anyway,
take any excuse to get back in her wedding gown.
Honestly, even a macabre excuse, I will take it.
No, but this is
But
amazing
that's my
organizing.
case.
Wow, well done.
Well, I sure hope you liked that clip. If you did like that clip, make sure you are subscribing to our YouTube channel, leaving us a nice review, and joining us on Patreon for even more video content, audio content, salacious content all around. Come join us. Treat yourself.